Big time fight coming up this weekend at welterweight. We have one that I'm sure Phil Collins and the boys with Genesis would have a lot of fun with, because it's just going to be a matter of time before we get that invisible touch. And Father Time taps one of these guys on the back. But we have Massaranduba, Francisco Trinaldo, who I just sounded like a mom in Connecticut trying to say his nickname. Yeah. Massaranduba. It's Massaranduba, Francisco Trinaldo. He's taking on one of my favorite action fighters to watch when he's on, in Dwight the Body Snatcher Grant. St. John, New Brunswick's own Donald Sutherland was in that movie. A lot of fun. We're having fun here, Matt. When I look at this fight, and when we learn a lot of things, it's the fact that these guys have had very interesting careers after 35. For Trinaldo, he was a guy kind of knocking on the rankings at lightweight for the longest time. I think he beat Alexander Hernandez, loses a fight, moves up to 170, and listen, that's where it gets weird, because, I mean, you look at the fight that he had his last time out. It was against... Well, it must have been somebody good. Now, hold on just a second, because I made a mistake. No, he didn't lose at 155.
What are you?
That's the weirdest thing. He moved up from 155 after he missed weight and fought Jai Herbert. And listen, you don't like to see it when somebody misses weight, especially late in their career. But they didn't do him any favors, and they gave him Muslim Salikov. And normally, when it's a Trinaldo fight, he's pressuring forward. He's throwing good volume. And in the fight against Salikov, he moved forward, and he got countered a lot. Muslim Salikov, listen... Wushu Sanda, world champion, won an appendage of the 2008 Beijing Olympics, won a gold medal there. Like, the guy is an accredited striker as it gets. And in that fight, Trinaldo just didn't have any success, got 3-time 30-27 in that one.
He didn't have no success. The rounds were all pretty close, and that's the thing about that fight. Like, yeah, Muslim Salikov won, and I thought he was going to knock Trinaldo out. But that fight's way closer than you've set it up. Like, Trinaldo did march forward. He didn't get knocked out by a guy who's got way more power, who's a much bigger fighter than him. Like, I think there were some positives to draw from that performance, especially when you try to look forward, because I think Muslim Salikov is a much more dynamic striker than Dwight Grant. He throws a lot more kicks than Dwight Grant does, so you can kind of eliminate that whole part out of his game. And he's got probably the same level of power Dwight Grant does too, and he wasn't even able to put Trinaldo down. That's why I think you're discrediting Trinaldo at 170 a little bit too much. Like, I don't think the fight against Muslim Salikov is a performance you can look to and say, oh, he lost to Salikov, so now I just don't think this is the weight class for him. I think Trinaldo could have fun fights with some guys at this weight class. Like, I think Trinaldo is able to get the win tonight, or not tonight, sorry, if he's able to get the win this weekend, like, Kevin Lee's probably a good opponent for him. Like, these are the guys I'd like to see Trinaldo in there with, because I don't think he's someone who can get into the rankings at 170 pounds, but I do think his speed and just his sort of craftiness on the outside is going to be good enough to beat some guys at 170. I just don't think it was good enough to beat a guy like Salikov, who is so comfortable waiting on the back foot, where not many guys are in this weight class. Like, I think Salikov can deal with pressure a lot better than a lot of guys can, and that's what he did in the fight against Trinaldo. But I do think that the skills Trinaldo showed in that performance are translatable against other guys in this weight class, and I do think that they're translatable against a guy like Dwight Grant.
Matt's pick is Trinaldo. My pick...
No, it's not. I think Dwight Grant's going to win, but I don't think we can just look at the Muslim Salikov fight and say Trinaldo has no chance whatsoever.
Matt going out there tonight, and putting everybody in a land of confusion. Matt, this is the weirdest part. When I look at it for Dwight Grant, he has a win on his record in his last fight. He fought Stefan Sekulic, a guy who had been away forever. Like, he was a guy like Nicolae Negumereanu, where it was like, okay, you lost your debut. What have you done? And for Sekulic, kind of turned it on. And in that fight, you can go back, you can find me at Craig Allen on Twitter. I scored it 29-28 Grant. Most people didn't score it that way. People got mad at me in the Twitter mentions. And if you look at it, MMA decisions, 6 had it 29-28 Grant. 9 had it 29-28 Sekulic. 1 had it 29-27 Sekulic. 2 had it 30-27 Sekulic. 1 had it 30-26 for Sekulic. The reason that I scored it for Grant, and I disagreed with the commentary in that fight, was because Sekulic had the takedowns, and that's what a lot of people thought won it for him. To me, he didn't do a lot with the takedowns, and Dwight Grant was more effective on the feet. So even if we throw that fight out and we look at the recent run, Grant almost finished Daniel Rodrigues. War Toyoni said no. Rodrigues gets back into it, knocks out Dwight Grant. Before that, he's getting out volume by Carlo Pedersoli. Pedersoli comes in, knocks him out. And then in the fight against Alan Jouban, he wins by split decision. A tricky fight that could go either way.
It's one of the worst fights ever.
Yeah, it's not really a great one. So when I look at this one in terms of matchmaking, the weirdest part about it is you talk about the rankings and guys having fun fights. you have to almost think that the UFC considers this relatively close to the rankings, considering Grant's coming off a win, Trinaldo's coming off a loss to a ranked guy.
I don't think the UFC thinks either one of these guys are getting in the rankings. I gotta be completely honest. Like, Dwight Grant, this is the thing that people forget. Yes, his highlights look great, but watch the performances up until those highlights.
Zach Otto.
He doesn't have good volume at all. Like, he gets out volume by most average strikers on the feet who have a decent pace, and he really needs to set up his knockout shots. I know he caught Daniel Rodrigues with a crazy, like, looping hook, but for the most part, that's not Dwight Grant's game. For the most part, it's you leave yourself open doing something crazy, and then he'll catch you. But other than him catching you in those windows, like, I don't think Dwight Grant's this crazy good striker on the back foot. I don't think he's someone who can go out there and push a pace on guys at 170. Like, if he fought... Santiago Ponzinibbio is not currently in the rankings right now. And if we're going to talk about welterweights who aren't in the rankings, but who are close... I think Ponzinibbio would blow the doors off a guy like Dwight Grant just because his overall pace is so high. And when you do look at Dwight Grant, this is why I'm bringing up all the Trinaldo, like Muslim Salikov stuff. You were thinking I was trying to set this up to pick Trinaldo, but not at all. Trinaldo pressured Salikov that whole entire fight. The difference between Dwight Grant and Muslim Salikov is that Salikov can keep his composure when he's moving backwards, throw with volume, and then use his footwork to move. Dwight Grant can't use his footwork and strike at the same time because he plants his feet and then throws. And the problem with the guy who plants his feet and throws is when you land, yeah, that's great. But when you miss, you are way out of position. And I know Trinaldo's 43 years old, but he's got way more pop in his shots than most 43-year-olds. He's like David Ortiz his last season. He was 42, 43?
He was just 40.
Okay, but he was a guy in his 40s.
Allegedly.
Who was supposedly way past his prime, who was able to show that, like, hey, I've still got pop. Now, I understand baseball power, much different than MMA power, but I do think that what Trinaldo showed in that Muslim Salikov fight at least sets up somewhat of a game plan for there to be a world where he beats Dwight Grant. Now, I think he's going to eat a shot and probably go down because he is 43, and I don't think he needs the power that a lot of guys at 170 can display, but I don't think you can just look at the scores of the Salikov fight, look at Dwight Grant as being a primary striker, and say, oh, Dwight Grant's going to win just based off that.
No, because the guy's a wushu world champion and an almost gold
I know, but you had just said, oh, he 30-27 him, so he's going to beat him.
Yeah, no, the point is, it wasn't that close of a fight. Yeah, Trinaldo landed some decent shots, but he got way out-volumed against a good fighter who's now in the rankings. So it's really, really tricky when you try and dissect it. If you want to focus on the giant positives, it's the fact that a 40-something was able to continue to win against Bobby Green, John McDessie, and Jai Herbert.
I thought he beat James Vick, too, back in the day.
And not Marcin Tybura, not Muslim Salikov. For Grant, the level of competition hasn't been there as much, but definitely has that pop on a shot. So when I look at the odds for this one, little bit of a surprise to me. Grant opened the underdog plus 140s, plus 101 or thereabouts right now. For Trinaldo, open to minus 160. He's a minus 125. I mean, when you're trying to make a pick for this one, it feels like you're throwing it all away. It feels like the last song on side 2. Maybe you go with, I'm not joking, the Brazilian. But, Matt, it is a really tricky fight when it all comes down to it.
It is. Listen, Dwight...
Parlay buster.
Don't put money on this fight. These are two borderline 40-year-olds fighting each other in a cage. I like the overall game of Dwight Grant, but again, this is... Okay, I'm going to say this. This is the Andrew Sanchez, Bruno Silva of this card. Craig doesn't think Trinaldo has any chance like he thought Andrew Sanchez, but I'm here to tell you, I really do think Trinaldo is like... He's right there in this fight. I really do think this fight's a lot closer than people think. People look at his age, they look at the fact that he used to be a lightweight, and people discredit him at this weight class. But I really do think that the skills he has are somewhat weaknesses for Dwight Grant. Like, Trinaldo can strike moving forward. He is evasive on the outside. Those are things Dwight Grant struggles with, and I could see... This could be one of those fights where Trinaldo wins the first round, looks really good in the second round, but then ends up getting caught by a clean shot. So I'm going to pick Dwight Grant, but I can see there being a world where Trinaldo wins.
Yeah, I've got Francisco Trinaldo in this fight because I think that brooding pressure is something that Dwight Grant really struggles with. Now, he has the kung fu in his back pocket. He's got a decent jiu-jitsu pedigree. I think Massaranduba is one of those guys that when he's smaller, gets his head right in that chest and doesn't go away. He's one of those guys that can accumulate time. And that is a real struggle. And we saw that Sekulic was able to do it against Grant in his last
never
time
done
out.
That ever, though.
Trinaldo's one of those guys that never leaves you're in front of you.
I know, but he's striking a lot with it. He's using his range. He throws kicks. He's not really using it with wrestling.
He's usually really busy right in front of you. He can really mix it up. Trinaldo's going to win this fight. So I've got Trinaldo in this one. Matt's got Dwight Grant. He puts words in my mouth. We're really having a great night making these picks, making Genesis references. Me eating sticks of cheese. Big time fight coming up this weekend. Split on the pick, but I'll tell you something that we're not split on, and we can definitely agree on. This main event between Paulo Costa and Marvin Vettori. I can't wait for it. So keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say,
let's get into it.